Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
It's a quandary that's perplexing me.
Your town has been host to a government conspiracy on the highest of levels. Let me tell you how they're going to cover it up.
But I'm going to strip away this mystery and expose its private parts.
That's got to be a ritual, man. Or at least some sort of a heart-sucking, possessed satanic crack or bat. What?
Was he mauled to death by a radioactive bear from hell?
We have to strike now, sir. Annihilate. Kill. Kill. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
A wise man once said the human spirit can overcome any obstacle. That man had obviously never run a triathlon.
Dear higher power guy or gal.
His name is Jesus.
Right, let's acknowledge the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come into your presence and we thank you for this conference. We thank you for the fellowship that we have with like-minded saints who see the need for discernment in the body of Christ and who see the need to give an answer to every man. We pray that as we consider the yoga boom that we've been experiencing in our culture, that you would equip us with wisdom and knowledge and the leading of your Holy Spirit to be able to respond to it in an effective manner. And I just pray that you would help me to get through this material and to make my points clearly, and that there would be good understanding of this subject, which is very esoteric in some ways, and that especially there would be discernment about how we should respond to it. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, would someone please pass out the outline here? Now, this is a talk I've newly prepared. This is the first time I'm giving it. And as you can see, my outline is rather bulky. So I don't know whether I'll be able to get through all of this material in an hour and 15 minutes. But if I find that I'm running out of time and I'm not going to get through it, I will jump to the end, because I know that the last couple of things that are being addressed are probably most prominent in your minds. And that would include the question of is yoga, or can it ever be neutral, something that a Christian could practice, as well as the question of, what are we as Christians to do about this? So it's sort of going to be a new experience for me. Usually I already have material prepared, but this is my first time speaking on yoga, so we'll see how it goes. All right, now, I don't have to tell you that yoga is big. I mean, you no doubt run into it all the time, and I don't need to tell you that it's in the news. It's been covered by Time and Newsweek and the major newspapers. It's features of it on TV. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I am sort of returning to this subject because I had written a chapter for the book The New Cults on yoga, and that was written in 1978. And at the time, somebody above me decided, well, this is really not a big enough subject. We don't need to deal with yoga. It's just a passing fad. At that time, there were 1 million practitioners. Today, there are 15 million. And it's probably, of all the subjects that we dealt with in the book, The New Cults, the one that has had the most lasting impact. So it's a shame that chapter wasn't published, but I am updating it and working on doing probably a 2-part series in the Christian Research Journal on yoga. And so at this point, I'm still in the process of research in terms of what's happened with yoga since I last did all that research on it. So I'm sharing with you my current findings, but I'm sure that by the time the articles go into the Christian Research Journal, it'll be more comprehensive than it is now. But let's look at what yoga is, first of all. It's derived from the Sanskrit word yug, which means to yoke. A term we're familiar with from the Bible. My true yoke fellow and so forth. Take my yoke upon you. It has to do with uniting people. And so it's to achieve union. The term yoga means to achieve union. And this union is with the Absolute, with a capital A. In other words, it's with the Hindu concept of God. And so you have to understand that about yoga, that is the purpose behind it. And that is the purpose behind every form and variety of yoga, including the forms of it that we experience today. Now, that doesn't mean it's the purpose of the practitioners of yoga. A lot of times people might practice yoga for their own physical health or appearance, but they're entering into something that had a purpose before they ever started participating in it. They're entering into something that was designed with a purpose. And so when you enter into something that is designed with a purpose, then whether it's your purpose or not, you on subtle levels become affected by that design purpose of the thing that you're entering into. And so that's something to bear in mind, is that there is a purpose beyond what your purpose might be for practicing yoga, and you can't just easily dismiss that or set that aside because you don't even understand it fully. You don't understand the purpose for all of the postures, the breathing exercises, and so forth. And so you may be doing it for one thing, but they were designed with another purpose in mind, and you're participating in that purpose, and I say being affected by it in ways that you may not understand. And we'll look at exactly how that works out a little bit later. But let's go on with a look at the historical background. The yoga system was developed by Patanjali in somewhere between the 3rd and the 2nd century BC. He was, yoga itself existed prior to Patanjali, but in his Yoga Sutras or aphorisms, he systematized yoga. And so he developed basically the yoga system that we're familiar with today. So it goes back to before the time of Christ. And, they will say it's 5,000 years old. That's ridiculous. But it is certainly a lot older than Patanjali in some form. But the form of yoga that we know today is developed by Patanjali. It became very big in the Bhagavad Gita. It was heavily emphasized, and it became very important within Hinduism. It was originally based, and this will come as a surprise to those of you who are familiar with Hindu philosophy but haven't read this somewhere. It was originally based on a dualistic philosophy. We normally think of the New Age and Hinduism as being pantheistic, that all is one, and that the purpose of yoga is to become one with the eternal God. But in the original, Hinduism is extremely varied. About the only thing that you'll find in all the different schools of Hinduism in India is a belief in karma and reincarnation, and you'll also find yoga in all the various schools of India. So these are about the unifying things. So to say that yoga is not Hinduism is ridiculous, because it's about one of the few things that can truly be said to be Hinduism all the way across the board. And so there's a line that people are being given by people who want to sell yoga as non-religious in order to get people to try it, with the idea of drawing them into the religion of Hinduism. So be aware of that. But the dualistic philosophy that was very prominent at the time that Patanjali developed yoga was called Samkhya, and that's spelled S-A-M or S-A-M-K-H-Y-A. Of course, I have it written down there for you, so why am I spelling it? If you have an outline, if you don't have an outline, where is? There's more back there. Okay. But according to this, there's 6 major schools or philosophies of Hinduism. And the Samkhya was dualistic, and by that it means that there isn't just one reality, as you find in most of the varieties of Hinduism we run into here in the West. There's one reality, which is Brahman, the cosmic consciousness, the eternal absolute, which is an impersonal force. And but that was not what Samkhya held to. Samkhya held to an idea that there were 2 realities. One was a group of individual souls called Purushas, And then the world, which would be called Prakriti. And Prakriti consists of three basic elements, the three gunas. Okay, and these are peace, desire, and let me see, I better look at my notes because it's escaping me. Passion and darkness. And so these three elements, when they are existing in equilibrium, the world is unmanifest. The world does not exist as we know it. It's just existing in the form of the three gunas in perfect harmony. But because of the eternal existence of the souls, the Purushas, something about the fact that the Purushas are there, which is a mystery, but it sets the gunas into a state of agitation where one of them becomes dominant, either the darkness or the passion or the peace. And when that happens, then this brings the world into manifestation. And this whole process happens on a cyclical basis. It's what later became known as the days and nights of Brahman. It's because these ideas continue in Hinduism today, even though there's no longer the dualism. You now have the monism. All is one. But the idea of the soul, of the Purushas, of the Prakriti, of the three gunas has just been transferred over into a monistic system. And so, what would happen, according to Samkhya, is that when each one of us as individual souls, as individual Purushas, would become, it's like we were curious about the Prakriti, about the world that was being developed, and so we would seek to understand it. And so we would become immersed in it. And then we would become involved in the process of reincarnation, of transmigration of souls from one body to another. And we would become captive and in bondage to this interplay of these three gunas, of the desire and of the darkness and of the peace. And so our thoughts, our sense of self, our ego, and our perceptions, all of these activities of mind are really a part of the Prakriti. They're not a part of the Purusha. The Purusha is pure consciousness. But when the Purusha becomes involved in Prakriti, then that pure consciousness fuels these manifestations of sense perceptions and a false sense of ego, of yourself as an individual person. And this causes all the misery of bouncing back and forth between the three gunas. And at every time in history, one of these gunas is dominating the others. And so there'll be periods of darkness, periods of passion, periods of peace, and it depends on which guna is dominating. And so this is true in nature, and it's also true in human beings and in society. And it's all seen as a big mess, and it's something to escape. And so the desire for salvation, according to this belief, is to achieve moksha, or deliverance, M-O-K-S-H-A, to achieve deliverance from the three gunas and from the interplays of passions and so forth. And so yoga was developed as a means, as a method for achieving moksha, for achieving deliverance. And so the whole goal then behind yoga is to re-achieve that pure state of consciousness, to escape all of the passions and the darkness and the peace and all the varying kinds of things, and to disengage from your thoughts, from your perceptions, your feelings, your imagination, all of the different tricks of your mind that are holding you in bondage to the material world. It's to escape that. And so yoga attempts to free you from an identification with your own ego and to feel and to identify once again with Purusha. And so this whole idea then was transferred over. The dualistic philosophy was not as satisfying, And so eventually we have the emergence in the Upanishads, and then in the Bhagavad Gita, and then ultimately with the 8th century philosopher Shankara, you have the emergence of a real strict monistic philosophy that all is one. And so instead of a bunch of individual Purushas, you've got you've got Brahman, and you have this idea of the soul, the Atman, which is within us, which is really indistinguishable for Brahman. And so we again need to become, but it's still the same idea, to become one with that pure state of consciousness. And so this is really the driving idea behind Hinduism in general, and the Advaita Vedanta school of Hinduism, the monism, the all is one pantheism that we usually encounter in Hinduism here in the West. And so under Roman numeral 2, capital letter C, liberation from the soul from its bondage to the material world is a central goal of all orthodox schools of Hindu philosophy, and for each, some system of yoga is the means for achieving this end. It has been appropriated in the same manner by many Buddhist sects, Sikhism, Jainism, Taoism, and various occult metaphysical traditions in the West, for example, Theosophy and the Unity School of Christianity. Okay, so let's look at some of the essential beliefs and practices of yoga. First of all, classical yoga is not interested in making the mind a blank, as is often supposed, but rather to so discipline the mind that the yogi no longer identifies his thoughts and sensory perceptions with his sense of self. This is accomplished following the 8 limbs of yoga. The first 2 limbs involve strict moral discipline, the next 2 strict physical discipline, and the next 3 strict mental disciplines. The final limb is the desired state of enlightenment. And a consideration of the limbs quickly reveals that yoga is a demanding autosoteric system. In other words, salvation by self-effort. Similar to original Theravada Buddhism with its 8-fold path. And you got to realize that Buddhism preceded the Patanjali and his Yoga Sutras, so clearly was an influence on it. So let's look at what the 8 limbs of yoga are. First of all, you have moral restraint, and so it's important to learn strict self-control, to not give in to your desires, to make the right ethical decisions. So there is this place within the system for ethical development and for self-control. Second of all, you have religious observance. You need to follow the various laws and expectations of the Hindu religion and of your particular caste within the Hindu religion. You got to realize that, within Hinduism, you have several castes, and each one has its own particular duties or dharma, and they are expected to do this. So ultimately, morality is not an absolute thing, but it's relative to the caste that you're in and what your duties are. That's why you have the whole drama in the Bhagavad Gita about Arjuna going through conflicts about going to war with his relatives, and Krishna appears and assures him that he is only responsible to fulfill his duty as a member of the warrior caste. And so you get this idea of morality being relative to the caste that you're in. The third thing is the postures or the asanas. And so this is your physical aspect of yoga. And the fourth is breath control, the pranayama, both of which, these 2 middle, or these 3rd and 4th limbs, basically comprise Hatha yoga, which is so popular in the West. The 5th is sense withdrawal. Now, these are getting into the mental disciplines, learning how to withdraw your awareness from the input of your senses, seeking after that pure state of consciousness. Another thing necessary to develop that is the sixth limb, which is concentration. And so that's a very important part of meditation. You may be concentrating on a sound. You may be, using chants, or you may be concentrating on an image, whether it's on your own body or a mandala, some image that you're focusing in on. But you're developing this concentration. And then seventh is meditative absorption. When you begin to experience the cosmic consciousness, you begin to lose your distinction between subject and object. You begin to feel one with the universe. And then finally is the state of samadhi, which is defined as direct knowledge, free from the distortion of the imagination. And when you achieve samadhi, then you are finally free from the three gunas. Which is what you've been seeking all along with this whole yoga practice. You're seeking to get free from being bounced around between passion, peace, and darkness. So that's the goal. Also important in the whole concept of yoga is the concept of prana and the seven chakras. Prana is the life force, and this is one of the problems, just as an aside to a lot of the new age medicine, alternative medicine, holistic health, is so much of it is based in one way or another on the concept of a life force that flows through the universe and that flows through your body and is meant to flow unobstructedly, but when it becomes obstructed, then this creates disease and disharmony, and so you got to unblock the life force. And this is what you have to realize about this is not a scientific concept. They often talk about energetic medicine, but this energy is part and parcel of a pantheistic philosophy, of a belief that the universe is alive. And how could the universe be alive unless the universe is God? In other words, in the Christian worldview, the universe is not alive. There's life in it, but it's not. The matter is, by definition, does not have a soul. Is not alive unless it's inhabited by a soul, as we are. And there's a distinction between creator and creation. So God is not, his energy and life force is not flowing through the universe as part and parcel of the universe. And so, furthermore, this is not a scientific concept of energy because it has nothing to do with any known physical forms of energy, such as electromagnetism, the nuclear force, or gravity. It's a spiritual concept. So when you get into trying to manipulate life forces, whether it's called prana or chi or what have you, you're getting into pantheism. And it's not scientific, but it is of an occult nature. And there can be experiences when people practice this that can zap them, that can put them into some kind of altered state of consciousness or give them some kind of spiritual experience, and can even produce some kind of physical effect for whatever reason. We could debate what the reason is. And so it may work in some way, but it doesn't work with the measured predictability of something that's truly scientific. And so you're getting into the occult when you get into the life forces. And that's what prana is. Now, prana is believed to flow through the body. This life force is believed to flow through the body and through the 7 chakras. And the 7 chakras are an important part of Hinduism and part of yoga. And the idea behind the 7 chakras is you've got, first of all, the first chakra, which is at the base of the spine, and which is basically associated with just dullness, materialism, just the most primitive state of consciousness possible. Then the second chakra is located at the genitals, and it's associated with people. In other words, if people are operating and living from the second chakra, they're going to be obsessed with sex. And so people who are obsessed with sex are understood to be that they're operating from the second chakra. The third chakra is the navel, and this is associated with ambition and the desire for power. So people who are driven by a desire for power or to succeed, their consciousness is located in the third chakra. And the fourth chakra is the heart chakra. And this is associated with selfless emotion. Now notice that selfless emotion is only the fourth out of 7 chakras. And really people who are operating from a higher chakra may not be so concerned with humanitarian work or stuff like that. They've moved on to a higher level. And that's one of the fundamental problems with Hinduism, is that morality and so forth is only valid at a certain level of development, and then you transcend the dualities of good and evil. And you end up, as we will be seeing a little later, with virtually every yogi having serious ethical problems. You think Christian televangelists and so forth have scandals, you should look into the yogis. You talk about, they like to, if you go to some yoga class, which I've gone to heard many different yogis speak, they always manage to get a dig in against Christianity, and they often will mention not Pat Robertson, but they'll mention Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker and so forth. Well, those that live in glass houses should not throw stones, and their problems are much worse. In fact, it's almost predictable. Any yogi has serious ethical problems. But it all fits in with the idea of transcending good and evil, which they think they can do. But we know that if you supposedly transcend good and evil, you have simply fallen over into the evil side of things, because you're no longer concerned about being good. And you got to be one or the other, because that matches the true universe we live in, which was created by a God who is good. And if you can't transcend God, which you can't, then you can't transcend good and evil, since He is good. So it's a real problem for Hinduism. But it's interesting though, because they often will say, well, Christianity is operating from the fourth chakra. That's as far up they got, up the chakras they got, and it's all well and good, but they're just sort of stuck there, and they haven't moved on to true enlightenment. The fifth chakra is located in the larynx, and it's associated with spiritual discipline, asceticism, good works, and so forth. But mainly just following, it's the beginning of mystical experience, but it would be associated with the ascetics within Hinduism. They've at least achieved the fifth chakra. Then the sixth is located above and between the eyes. It's the third eye concept. And this is a pretty high level to be operating from. You've now got the vision of God. And then the seventh and final chakra is the crown chakra above the head, and this is associated with samadhi. Someone who's operating from the seventh chakra is enlightened. So the sixth chakra, the third eye, that's considered conditioned rapture. The seventh chakra, which would be any of these gurus, these yogis, these god-men who have followers and are worshipped and teach others, they're usually considered to have achieved the seventh. And they have unconditioned rapture. Pardon? Oh, yeah. So, also, under capital letter E, it is believed that once a yogi has achieved samadhi, he no longer produces karma, and the only remaining karma for him to work out is that which was accumulated before attaining enlightenment. Which, may still mean he's going to be around for a long time. Okay, now, let's look at the major approaches to yoga. The first is Raja or Royal Yoga, and this is seeking salvation through mind control. It is believed that the mind is a fine part of the body, and there is intimate interaction between the two. And by bringing the body under control, the yogi can also control the mind and bring its powers into his service. This is the basis for yoga's emphasis on physical disciplines and postures. So the whole reason for all the physical disciplines and postures is in order to bring the mind under subjection, because of the belief of the interrelationship between the two. So this is going to help you to absolutely bring your mind, with the goal of getting to that pure mind state that I talked about earlier. And then second of all, Raja Yoga includes all of the 8 limbs and is distinct from other approaches to yoga in that it can include within it any of the other approaches. Okay, there are 3 other major approaches to yoga which are included within the Raja Yoga approach. These are Bhakti Yoga, which is seeking salvation through devotion to a personal manifestation of God. One of the things that emerged in Hinduism was because of the impersonal concept of God, what I believe is a natural desire for a love, intimate relationship with God was extremely unfulfilled. And so Patanjali actually developed this concept of Ishwara, the personal God, which was unnecessary to the philosophical system, but was to meet an emotional need. And so Ishwara was not considered to be the creator God, but he was just this sort of great soul that helped the other souls in their evolution. And it's very similar in some ways to process philosophy and process theology, where you have a God who's helping us smaller souls along in our growth, but yet he is not really in control of the whole thing. He's a part of it. But that's panentheism, and this was dualism. But then the Ishwara concept showed up after yoga was transferred over into pantheism, as sort of the personal manifestation of the impersonal God. So Ishwara was the personal manifestation. And then in the around the 13th century, I believe, you had a philosopher by the name of Ramanuja, who developed the idea that the ultimate nature of God was personal. And so you do have a school within Hinduism that believes that God is personal, and that's Ishwara. And he identified this with one of the gods in the Hindu Trinity, and that would be, let me see, not Shiva, but Vishnu, thank you, yeah. With Vishnu. And then later you had a guy by the name of Chaitanya, who identified one of Vishnu's incarnations, Krishna, as being the ultimate God. And that's where we get the Hare Krishna movement today. And so the Hare Krishnas are unique among the Hindu sects that we have here in the West in that they really do believe God is personal. And so they practice Bhakti Yoga as the supreme form of yoga. And that's devotion to personal God. But it's still it's not based on grace, it's a salvation system, and it's a form of panentheism. They do believe they are a part of God, but that there's a distinction within the nature of God between the world and Krishna or Vishnu. And so we have an eternal relation. We never just get absorbed into God like the other schools believe. And then another form of yoga is the Jnana Yoga, which is seeking salvation through intellectual knowledge and discipline. So your Hindu philosophers, such as Shankara and Ramanuja, would be considered Jnana Yogis. These are people who are using the mind to understand God, that which is true, that which is not true. And then the third is Karma Yoga, which is seeking salvation through good works, which are done with detachment concerning the results of the actions. And so this is a key point, is that even those that are trying to gain salvation through doing good works, and you've got, in reaction to Christian missionary efforts of doing charitable works in India, that you then had like the Ramakrishna Mission and other efforts to do humanitarian work, copying the Christian works. But in their school of thinking, if you're doing karma yoga, you're doing good works for other people, it's very important not to get emotionally attached to what you're doing, to really care about the people and the results. Because that means you're still caught up in prakriti. That means you're still caught up in maya or illusion. And so you do good works, but there's no real heart involved with it, because if there is, then you're still deluded. Yeah.
Do it, but not for any real reason.
Right.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So that's a really compelling ethic, don't you think? I mean, doesn't that just make you want to go out and help people who are dying of AIDS and so forth? All right, then additional approaches to yoga include Hatha or physical yoga, and the website, the ABCs of Yoga, which looks to be an Indian site because of a lot of the grammatical problems and just the speech construction, describes Hatha Yoga in the following way. Hatha Yoga is the path of physical yoga or yoga of postures, is the most popular branch of yoga. Hatha Yoga considered the body as the vehicle for the soul. Okay? It uses physical poses or asana, breathing techniques or pranayama, meditation in order to bring the body in perfect health and for the more subtle spiritual elements of the mind to emerge freely. So let me just point out that in their own definition, and this is common within the literature of Hatha Yoga from India, the purpose of it is the different postures and the breathing exercises is to allow for the more subtle spiritual elements of the mind to emerge freely. So in other words, it's to facilitate altered states of consciousness which can lead to a sense of oneness with the universe. The practice of Hatha Yoga will result to the union of the body and the soul. It aims to make the body perfect and fill it with life force. This is a very important point. Hatha Yoga is very much intended on opening you up to prana, to the free movement of prana, or this life force within your body. And so the whole discipline is intended for that purpose. Now, the classical textbook of Hatha Yoga is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, written in the 15th century AD by Svatmarama, which opens by declaring that Hatha Yoga is strictly preparatory for Raja Yoga alone. And many Eastern yogis strategically teach Hatha Yoga to Westerners as a way of introducing them to the world of yoga and Eastern philosophy under the pretext of merely offering them improved physical health and appearance. And you find textbooks in which they specifically discuss this strategy. I mean, we're not just inferring that that's what they're doing. They tell their own followers in their own literature that that's what they're doing, what their goal is.
One of their guides is when I had a knee injury, I was told by this person that this knee injury, I wouldn't have to undergo surgery, which I didn't, but I did. Yeah, she suggested yoga. And one of the things she told me, I think it was Hatha Yoga, it had to be, because one of the things she told me is she had 2 ski injuries. When she had surgery on the other, she practiced yoga. She said, the other one I practice yoga, I feel better. And that's what was the guise. I said, then I don't have to undergo surgery. Then I can feel, I did feel better. But you know what? Now I know it was altered state of consciousness and everything else. Yes. So the physical needs is one of the guises.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It'll make you feel better. You won't have to undergo the surgery. And I didn't. But yeah, I did. I probably practiced Hatha Yoga for 6 months, not knowing that it was altered.
Right.
It was Hindu and related and
well, yeah, absolutely.
That was 8 years ago, 10 years ago, but still.
Yeah, well, you are not alone. There are many other Christians like you.
If I may, I want to say also that Hatha Yoga or any kind of yoga, when we talk about opening up to the life force, quote unquote, we open up to the unseen kingdom of Satan.
Right. Well, that's what I'm
being very blunt.
Yeah, to put bluntly what I've been alluding to, okay, now, also, many Eastern yogis strategically teach Hatha Yoga. Oh, I already said that. Number 4, since its exercises were designed to evoke a spiritual response from the more subtle elements within nature, Raja yogis often warn of the dangers that can result from practicing physical yoga without the accompanying moral and mental disciplines. Okay, another form of yoga, and we'll get back to the physical yoga later on. We're not finished with that concern. Another form of yoga is Kundalini yoga. Kundalini yoga deliberately attempts to arouse and raise the Kundalini or serpent power to believe to be Shakti or divine energy, which sleeps at the base of the spine. It's coiled up in 3.5 circles.
It's actually used a lot for the sexual, to get people aroused in sexuality, that's been teachers to do.
Well, that's more associated with tantric yoga, which we're going to be looking at in a minute here. But yeah, I mean, it can work that way.
It's very interesting, again, to get back to the statement I just made recently, serpent power. I like that. What a serpent would be.
Right, and of course, Kundalini Yoga uses asanas, pranayama, which is the breathing exercises, mudras, which are hand positions, chanting, mantras, and meditation to help the yogi gain sufficient control of himself to control the Kundalini as well. A classic object of meditation is the 7-petaled lotus flower representing the 7 chakras, and the 1,000-petaled lotus represents the crown chakra, and this is often seen in visionary experiences. Raising the Kundalini often results in powerful mystical experiences and visions, and yogis believe this phenomenon is the true explanation for visionary experiences in all religions. And so according to their grid, they believe that anyone who has a spiritual experience has, to some degree, aroused the Kundalini. But because they're not properly schooled by a guru who can teach them the true objective of yoga, they misinterpret what's happening and come up with all kinds of unhelpful and maybe even harmful beliefs. So they believe that, for example, when Muhammad had the vision of the angel Gabriel and was given the Quran, he had probably aroused the Kundalini, and it maybe ascended up to the 3rd chakra, the desire for power, or maybe the 4th, selfless giving at best, but that he was not truly enlightened, and so it had a disastrous consequence upon the world. They would also interpret visions of biblical prophets. Well, this is probably they aroused the Kundalini up to the 4th chakra, and it's done some good for the world, but it hasn't resulted in enlightenment, and now it's a dangerous thing because it creates division. We don't realize that all religions are one, and we don't realize that we're all one with nature. Therefore, we have religious wars, we have ecological degradation, and the whole solution for humankind is if we would just get trained by a proper guru or a proper yogi, learn how to raise the Kundalini properly, get it all the way up to the crown chakra, and then everything would be fine.
This has been transcendental meditation. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, one of my other gods in my life. Would this have been him?
Oh yeah, transcendental meditation is a form of yoga. It doesn't so much involve the physical postures, but meditation is a part of yoga.
I had a mantra, I followed the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and I was taught all the practices. And this was in the early 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, right here in Santa Fe. Right in high school, and I did it with my mother. I practiced with my mother, who was a Catholic, who still is. So I mean, it just all of it goes like this. I'm here today because of God. Praise be to God. Oh my.
Well, yes, I praise God for that. Okay. Now, number 4, in a manner somewhat comparable to LSD, the raising of the Kundalini is considered risky, with temporary madness, lasting mental instability or illness, and occult oppression being possible consequences. And thus, many yogis warn against the practice for most people and condemn yogis such as, for example, Yogi Bhajan of the Happy, Healthy, and Holy Order, 3HO, who indiscriminately teach it to the public. And I recommend the book Path to Higher Consciousness by Gopi Krishna. He describes how for almost 7 years he suffered severe psychological and spiritual disorders after raising the Kundalini, and it's quite enlightening to read about what the experiences that this unleashed for him. In fact, on a website, www.om-guru, it says about this, he conceived of this energy as an intelligent force over which he had little control once it was activated. he just didn't realize how close to the truth that he was.
What was his name again?
Gopi Krishna.
Is he still involved in it?
He's dead now. He was born around 1908.
He's involved in it.
Yogi Bhajan is dead, though. He died last year.
Oh, he did? Okay.
And I want to make a statement that I live in the area there in Espanol, and I was just, for 2 weeks, I was in Georgia, Thomaston Church, studying scriptures and spiritual implications of different New Age applications. Kundalini Yoga is basically a baseline for serpent power, which is Satan power. So it's a baseline for all measure of abilities and things in that Kundalini Yoga is to achieve serpent power. Well, you can be assured of something.
Moving on. Tantra yoga is another form of yoga. And according again to the ABC of Yoga website, which you have the address for that there, Tantra yoga is the path of ritual and perhaps the most misunderstood path. Some may think of Tantra yoga as sorcery, witchcraft, magic, spell, or some mysterious formula. Most people perceive Tantra yoga as sexual. All of these perceptions are far from the truth. Tantra is the knowledge concerning tattva, truth or Brahman, and mantra, mystic syllables. It utilizes rituals to respectfully experience the sacred in everything we do, not just sex, though sex is part of it. It aims to expand our awareness in all states, whether awake or asleep. Tantra yoga practitioners must have purity, humility, devotion, courage, dedication to his guru, cosmic love, faithfulness, contentment, dispassion, non-covetous, and truthfulness. And then I add, despite the positive spin of the above definition, Tantra yoga actually consists of two schools, the right hand and the left hand. Right-handed Tantra may indeed not even engage in literal sex as part of its ritual, but left-handed Tantra not only involves literal sex, but also has been known in some cases to involve black magic and all kinds of debauchery and criminal acts, including murder. And I have an article here which I won't have time to read because I'm looking at the clock. But it's India's mystical murders, and it tells about child sacrifice going on, 10 different murders happening in the state of Uttar Pradesh. It says, acting on the instructions of the tantric, the couple arranged for the kidnapping last month of a 6-year-old neighbor, and then, as the tantric led them in chanting mantras, mutilated and killed the child. Monu Kumar on the bank of an irrigation canal, according to a police report. Murti Samaru allegedly completed the fertility ritual by washing herself in the child's blood. It's definitely, some of the things you hear about Tantra yoga are not fiction.
It's also part of Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, right. Right. Okay, now, obviously, yoga is related to the occult. First of all, it promises all of these powers. It's rather amusing to read. I have read the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's description of the different powers that can be attained from yoga. As someone who enjoyed Marvel Comics when I was a kid, I might have been very motivated to practice yoga if I had read that at the wrong time in my life. Because I would love to do some of the things the yogis apparently can do, including turning invisible, flying, shrinking to the size of an atom, transportation of their bodies to different places, reading minds, have super strength. I mean, basically, if you're familiar with Superman, virtually all of these powers are supposed to be available to yogis, as well as, the fact that they make contact with spirits. And within yoga, you have contact both with spirits that they desire to make contact with, but you also have the phenomenon of unwelcome and undesired contact with spirits as being a real problem. And it's nonetheless, getting all caught up in the alleged powers of yoga is discouraged in a lot of yoga textbooks because it's believed to be a major distraction and temptation, which will keep you still involved with prakriti, and so you need to avoid that. But a lot of the super gurus who we're about to consider, as well as, say, Sai Baba, supposedly have a lot of these yogic powers. And you even find this in transcendental meditation with the whole idea of, the cities, the attempt to fly, which is described as flying, but the pictures that you actually see and the descriptions of it is just basically bouncing up and down on your butt, and they, you pay a lot of money to learn how to do this, and once you do it, you've really arrived. You're at a high level of enlightenment.
But when you land, you don't have a bump on one side called the wallet.
Which is a lot thinner once you're through the whole process. Okay, now let's look at some of the... boy, I'm concerned about time. Well, yeah, let me just get a show of hands. My last seminar, I just went a little bit over the hour and 15-minute mark, but I've noticed other workshops I've gone to go the full hour and a half. How many of you would like to go the full hour and a half? Okay, well, that'll help. That'll help us to get through more of this material. And if you do need to leave, at some point, you don't feel like you'll be causing inconvenience or something. We welcome you to, leave if you need to.
Yeah, Elliot, it's just that whoever gets this room next may come in a couple of minutes early to prepare. Right?
Yeah, that's true, because we're followed by another one. Right. So we'll break off for sure about 23 after, I'd say. That will give them time. All right. That's a good point, Marcia. So some major yogis, we'll go through this quickly because it's not that important. The one who really introduced yoga to the West was Swami Vivekananda at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. He spoke at the Parliament of the World's Religions, and he was an advocate of Raja Yoga, wrote a lot about that, and very respected. Then the next one who came along was Swami Paramahansa Yogananda, the founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship. If you read his autobiography of a yogi, you read a lot about these superpowers that the yogis supposedly achieve. He was a charismatic personality, very, interesting writer, and he interested a lot of people in yoga and Eastern philosophy. And he practiced what he called Kriya Yoga, which is a ritualized form of yoga that emphasizes breathing exercises and seeks to really channel the Kundalini power. Swami Muktananda was another famous yogi who supposedly had a lot of different powers. He died in 1982. He founded the Siddha Yoga sect, and he was immersed in a lot of scandals in terms of exploiting his female disciples sexually. Sai Baba, who I mentioned previously, has had the same problem, only exploiting his male disciples sexually. And this guy is a major figure within India, so this is a major crisis of faith for a lot of people there. Swami Satchidananda died August 19th, 2002. He founded the Integral Yoga Institute, as well as Yogaville Ashram in Central Virginia. And he was a promoter of the unity of all faiths, and he was highly revered and very influential, but also was immersed in scandals because he had a habit of sexually exploiting his secretaries, his female secretaries. BKS Iyengar is a teacher of Hatha Yoga. He is still alive. He's 87 years old. He has 180 Iyengar institutes around the world. He authored a book called Light on Yoga in 1966 that's considered a classic, as well as Light on Pranayama in 2000 and Yoga, the Path to Holistic Health in 2001. So he's very influential and respected. And then I have Bikram Chaudhary, who is located in Los Angeles. He's famous for Bikram Yoga, which is a 90-minute routines of 26 postures and 2 breathing exercises in rooms that are heated to a sweltering 100 degrees or more. And he's 59 years old, former weightlifter. He's sort of the yogi to the stars. He lives in Beverly Hills. He's extremely wealthy. He's got all kinds of Rolls Royces and other cars. He is involved in a controversy right now because he sought to patent his postures and so forth, so other people couldn't use it, so he would get the money for it, which is against the philosophy of yoga, supposedly. And he, too, has been involved in all kinds of sexual scandals with his female pupils, but he has an interesting excuse for it. He says several of them were threatening that they would commit suicide if he didn't sleep with them. And so, he had to help them through this problem and serve their need. One newspaper reporter commented on this that even Bill Clinton hadn't thought of that one. So you see a pattern here.
What's it called? What's his yoga practice called?
Bikram.
Like his first name.
Bikram Yoga.
He's patented it. In this 1 year, it's not good.
Okay, now, next I want to look at the popularity and penetration of yoga into Western culture. In the summer of 2003, Yoga Journal released a study finding that 15 million people in America practiced yoga, which is a 29% jump from the previous year. Yoga is also being incorporated into the schools, and I wanted to read to you from the Wichita Eagle. Yoga joins curriculum at more grade schools. I'm just reading a couple of paragraphs. At 7 public schools here, with more on the way, the yoga break has taken its place beside typical school rituals like recess and the Pledge of Allegiance. With free teacher training by Tony Sanchez, a yoga master, yoga is becoming an integral part of the physical education classes and regular classrooms as well. In Seattle, 15 of 97 public schools have yoga as a warm-up in gym class, and it is an elective for high school students, said Bud Turner, the physical education coordinator. A nonprofit group called Yoga Inside, founded 3 years ago in Los Angeles, sponsors classes in 31 states, many in schools in poor urban neighborhoods. To avoid potential controversy, the program focuses solely on the physical aspects of yoga. There is no Sanskrit or mention of Hindu deities. And then another one, yoga causes tension for public schools, which appeared on the Fox News Channel website. In Aspen. Professional football teams do it. Madonna does it every day. Even a U.S. Supreme Court justice does it. But some don't want elementary school kids doing yoga on the grounds it teaches public school children about religion. It's a church and state issue, Steve Woodrow, the father of a first grader, said. Woodrow, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Aspen, Colorado, became upset when his daughter's public school announced that yoga classes would begin this fall. He and other parents complained to the school board, claiming it was a clear violation of the separation of church and state. But the American Yoga Association and the school disagree. Quote, the common belief that yoga derives from Hinduism is a misconception, AYA's website states. See, just the crass and bold lying, outright lying. Yoga actually predates Hinduism by many centuries. Oh, it does. Aspen School Superintendent Tom Farrell was shocked by the charges. I was surprised when there was an outcry from some people, he said. The idea to incorporate yoga into the school came from the principal and some parents who thought it might help the students relax, he said. If I thought it for a minute it was religion in the schools, I wouldn't promote it, Farrell said. But despite the popularity, Woodrow thinks the younger set isn't ready. Even some of the most basic yoga terms, he claims, may cause elementary school students to bring up questions that have answers based in Eastern religious philosophies. Yoga is not a religion, the AYA states online. It has no creed or fixed set of beliefs. Now notice how we define religion as the key issue in all of this. So they're defining a religion as something that has a creed or a fixed set of beliefs. Nor is there a prescribed godlike figure to be worshipped in a particular manner. Of course, usually you are ultimately asked to worship your yogi, or at least your guru. The core of yoga's philosophy is that everything is supplied from within the individual. Okay, now this isn't religion. Right? The core of yoga's philosophy is everything is supplied from within the individual. Thus, there is no dependence on the external figure, either in the sense of a person or God figure or a religious organization. Okay, here's the whole problem, is that the way they define religion, it lets them in and keeps us out of the public schools. They're still talking about your source of self, as we've already seen from understanding the philosophy of yoga. Of course, it's all going within. That's the worldview. God is within. And it's autosoteric. You're not trusting in Christ for salvation. You're trying to work it out yourself. You got a whole system for it. So yeah, of course it's from within. That doesn't make it religious. And this is the whole problem that we're facing in our culture, is we've got an inadequate definition of religion which discriminates against Christianity. If they would allow all religions into the schools, we could all compete. Well, then, let the best religion win. But they don't. They define Christianity or theistic religions as religion. We can't get into the schools. You can't offer prayer to Jesus as a way of calming students, but you can teach them how to meditate and do yoga, and that's perfectly fine. So there's just something completely wrong about that, because it is religion, historically and logically. Okay, now, next thing is yoga is in sports and physical fitness centers. 75% of health clubs have yoga. Yoga is getting into the Olympics. Yoga is in healthcare, mental health, and scientific research. Research of yoga body control methods to reduce tension has been going on for a long time. It was started by Elmer and Alice Green, and the whole biofeedback thing developed out of that. It's used for achieving psychological balance, so it's often prescribed by psychologists. Of course, it's used for physical therapy and as a basic physical exercise regimen. And then you have yoga for kids. You have a movement across the country right now. A woman by the name of Jodie Cometer is the one who is associated with this. She has a book called The Complete Idiot's Guide for Yoga with Kids, and or to teach yoga for kids. And it's basically teaching little children, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, how to do the different postures, familiarizing them with yoga so that they are intrigued by it, and then when they get older, they teach them the meditation and the philosophy. And she lays all of this out in her book. Yeah, deception has always been a part of the whole approach. Okay, we got to keep moving here. And then another problem is yoga in the church. Yoga has long been a staple in the Roman Catholic and liberal Protestant church. For example, Father George A. Mahoney, a popular speaker among Catholic charismatics, writes in his book, Inward Stillness, the ultimate worth of any technique must be measured by the fruit produced. Hence, no Christian ought to condemn out of hand any technique, be it yoga, the use of music and prayer, chants, Silva mind control, Erica, TM, or whatever, unless for the person, it has not been a help, but a definite hindrance to prayer. A technique has no meaning unless we ask the question, how is it being used? What are the fruits that come from such use? Does it help us or others pray with greater consciousness beyond the habitual superficial level of controlled discursive prayer? And, the problem with that is the idea that these techniques are neutral, and if they're used by Christians, then they will benefit the Christian. Because these techniques, you see, the whole Hindu approach is to empty the mind of normal conceptual thought so that you lose your sense of who you are and your separation from your environment, so that you begin to feel like you're one with the universe. And that leads to a belief in the oneness of the universe, and it also leads to an openness to spirit entities beginning to enter into your thought process and into your life. So it's creating a spiritual void that is then filled by forces that are not of God. But this whole process is antithetical to Christian meditation, which is, and I'll be talking about this at my plenary address this afternoon. Christian meditation is involved with the content of the Bible. You're thinking about the revelation of God. You're thinking about the nature of God, the attributes of God. His Word, and so you're not emptying your mind of content, you're filling it with God's revelation. So these are two different things. So the idea that these things can help Christian devotions is completely false, because the whole goal is to create a spiritual experience that will lead you into pantheism and into that whole other realm. Okay, so now that's, you're Roman Catholic, and of course, in your liberal churches, yoga is very common. Yoga classes are often offered. But what about in the evangelical church? Well, unfortunately, there's a movement afoot right now to bring it into the evangelical church, and we even have what's known as Christian yoga being offered. And, there's an article called Yoga Gaining Popularity with Christians, and I give you how you can access it on the web. And that's just one. I've read several articles along these lines of different Christians and evangelical churches teaching yoga and saying that this can be incorporated into a Christian devotion. One other thing I didn't list here, but they even have now yoga for dogs. I've read several articles about this, and yoga for other pets. And all I can say is I want to encourage them to put as much of their time and resources into that as possible. I think that's an excellent way for them to use up their time, is teaching yoga to dogs. Leave the kids alone. Okay, now we... Don't be so dogmatic. All right, let's move on to the most important part. We've got to discuss this. Is it or can it be religiously neutral? First of all, once one becomes involved in the world of yoga, it is now a part of one's lifestyle. Okay, now I know there must be somebody here who came because I've heard of at least 3 different people attending this conference practicing yoga. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure some of you here came because you're practicing yoga and you want to know whether you should continue. And so this is for you. Think about this and just think, and let's really give serious consideration to the points I'm making here. Once one becomes involved in the world of yoga, it is now a part of one's lifestyle. One now identifies with other practitioners and friendships will develop. One's sympathies will align with the practice and its practitioners. These are just natural things that happen when you get involved with anything, okay? There will not always be clear lines or warning signs separating the physical from the spiritual. You're entering into a system you didn't develop that was designed to lead you into the spiritual. You have the confidence that you will always be able to avoid those things. How do you always know you're going to recognize them? Won't there be times when your guard will be down and you won't realize what you're getting into? There will be a subtle social and psychological pressure to progress further into the discipline. In other words, move on and start doing chants or meditations and so forth. Engaging in postures and breathing exercises you will be engaging in postures and breathing exercises that have established spiritual meanings within Hinduism. And this will lead to confusion and a possible embracing on some level of these concepts. And objectivity to discern unchristian elements could easily be compromised. You're subjectively involved in this now. You're emotionally invested in it. And it's going to be harder to spot things that you should be on guard for. So let's look at some specific things that can happen. Teachers and students greet each other often with the Sanskrit namas, which means I honor the divine within you, or the God within you. Many classes conclude with a short meditation on a Hindu mantra. What is a Hindu mantra? It is the name of a Hindu god or goddess. And now I'm quoting here from Yoga Journal, the most preeminent magazine or publication in the world of yoga. Quote, the fact that so many yogis report spiritual experiences in their practices indicates how we might best view the ancient art. While many Westerners come to yoga primarily for its health benefits, it seems safe to say that most people who open to yoga will, in time, find its meditative qualities and more subtle effects on the mind and emotions equally, if not more, beneficial. They will, in other words, come to see yoga as a spiritual practice. And then the magazine Body and Soul makes this observation. Operating on the theory that an open body leads to an open heart, yoga starts with a renewal of the body and leads to a rejuvenation of the spirit. The three main aspects of yoga practice, postures or poses, asanas, breath control, pranayama, and meditation, make up a gradual focusing inward, body to mind, towards stillness and serenity. See, this is the whole goal of the yoga practice, is to create this stillness and serenity. According to yoga philosophy, the alteration of purely physical habits, your body awareness, the way you move and breathe, will naturally alter the way you use your mind. So see, all these things are calculated. The postures, the breathing exercises are calculated to alter the way you use your mind. How will it alter the way you use your mind? So that it'll be more conducive to altered states of consciousness, meditation, the Hindu philosophy. Also, when we're talking about Hatha yoga, even if you don't practice meditation, if you're practicing Hatha yoga, you've got to get involved with pranayama, the breathing exercises. So I want to read from an author by the name of Richard Rosen, who was interviewed in a promotion of his book, The Yoga of Breath, a step-by-step guide to pranayama. And these are just some comments that he makes. He says, asana is sort of the star of the yoga show in this country, while pranayama seems to play second fiddle. The practice of pranayama is in many ways more subtle and challenging than asana, and its benefits are much slower in coming. The neglect is unfortunate because the physical practice of Hatha yoga consists of two, quote, wings, asana and pranayama, and without making use of both, you won't get your yoga practice very far off the ground. So then he's asked by Phil Catalfo, who interviewed him, what is pranayama and how does it fit into the practice of yoga? And so Rosen replies, the standard answer to the first part begins by parsing the Sanskrit word pranayama into its two constituent words, prana and ayana. Prana is the universal life force, a creative power or intelligence that drives everything and everyone along. Often it's translated as breath, but that's an oversimplification. Breath is only one of the many manifestations of prana. Ayana literally means to expand and restrain. Pranayama is literally the expansion and restraint of the life force. So that's what it is. The whole goal of it is to expand and restrain the life force. It's not being done for health reasons. It's being done for a spiritual purpose. Okay? Then Catalfo asks him, so is pranayama practice then would include exercises designed to enable you to get to that point where you understand that and then work with the breath? And Rosen says, with all our emphasis on asana, it's easy to imagine that it's the central practice of Hatha Yoga, but it's not. Asana is essentially a preparation for pranayama, a means to purify and ripen the body-mind for breathing and meditation. Okay, so then under capital letter C on your final page, I am quoting from the Yoga Journal, Alan Reeder, Reconcilable Differences. But what if the religious people in your life won't let you sidestep the doctrinal controversies? For instance, the propriety of, in other words, talking about the Christians in your life as a yogi. For example, the propriety, they're hung up on chanting a Hindu deity's name. Well, he says, Matthew Fox sees no problem with challenging them back. I love this line from, and this is Matthew Fox, the renegade Catholic priest who's now an Episcopalian priest. All heretics find a comfortable home in the Episcopal Church. Sorry if you're Episcopalian, but truth hurts. So if there's been too much God talk in our brains, no, he says, I love this line from Eckhart, Meister Eckhart, the mystic from medieval Roman Catholicism, about I pray to God to rid me of God. If there's been too much God talk in our brains, then other names, whether it be Brahma, Shiva, Shakti, what have you, can add to our repertoire. It's not a subtraction if our God is so fragile that he or she is threatened by new names. Then we ought to look at that. If you read the Bible, you get the distinct impression that the God of the Bible is a jealous God and that there's nothing that ticks him off more than worshiping other gods, and the surest way to bring his judgment upon you is to worship other gods. But that particular central emphasis of the religion that he claims to be a follower, it doesn't seem to matter to Matthew Fox at all, and he thinks we ought to look at what's God's problem if he's so hung up about other gods. Okay, so then, in an unguarded moment, while speaking of the value of yoga to psychotherapy, Yoga Journal reveals the thoroughly Hindu philosophy behind the practice of yoga. And can I just do this and get to that? I'm trying to get us out of here in time. From the yogic perspective, all human beings are, quote, born divine. And so this is what yoga is really about, people. And each human being has a core soul, Atman, that dwells eternally in the changeless, infinite, all-pervading reality, Brahman. In Patanjali's classic statement of this view, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, we are already in that which we seek. We are already that which we seek. We are God in disguise. We are already inherently perfect, and we have the potential in each moment to wake up to the true, awake, and enlightened nature. This is a far cry from the struggles of ego, id, and superego suggested by Freud. In this sophisticated psychology of yoga, avidya, or ignorance of our true nature, is the central problem of the human self and the source of all suffering. In other words, we've simply forgotten who we are. We've forgotten that we are the fantastic dance of energy and consciousness, the divine play, Lila, of being and becoming. And what is the source of this alienation? Not sin, nor wrongdoing, nor psychotherapy of any kind. We're simply misidentified. Okay, that is what yoga is in a nutshell. That is also what Hinduism is in a nutshell. And that's what you're involving yourself in when you practice yoga. Now, what can we as Christians do? I've got two things listed here. First of all, offer biblically acceptable alternatives. I often say get some stretch exercises that are not derived from Hinduism. There's nothing wrong with stretch exercises per se. A woman by the name of Laurette Willis has developed Praise Moves Ministry. I've been to the website. I'm going to establish contact with her. I'm very interested in this. I'm going to check it out better, but what I saw on the website looked good. And there's an article on her in the latest issue of Today's Christian Women, The Truth About Yoga. But she has developed something that involves praise and worship with stretch exercises, different Christian-oriented postures and so forth, and meditations on scriptural truth. And it sounds okay to me. So I would go and check out her website. Are you familiar with her? Yeah. Okay. And then also work to remove yoga from the public schools and other public institutions. I personally had success with this in 1982. There was a thing called Project Goal in a school district in Cerritos, California. Some parents and I went before the school board. It was being implemented. We made the arguments I'm making here for the religious nature of yoga. We prevailed with the school board. They removed it from that school district. But that was one battle won, but we're losing the war. Okay? So we really need to press this point that I've been making about the religious nature of yoga and the inequality of the way that they're defining religion to allow Hinduism in the schools, but not to allow Christianity.